Here are the 10.2 notes over multiplying and dividing rational expressions. We're going to start with a quick review. Factoring will be important today. First things first, we want to look for a common factor among our terms here, because we do have a leading coefficient of 2. That makes things a bit harder to factor. So let's see. This is divisible by 2. 4 will also be divisible by 2, and so will 16. So I'm going to pull the 2 out first. Out front. Now, what's left behind, we can find by dividing each term by the 2 that I pulled out. So, 2x squared divided by 2 leaves behind x squared. Minus 4x divided by 2 leaves behind minus 2x. And then minus 16 divided by 2 leaves behind minus 8. At this point, we now have a trinomial. We can factor by splitting the middle. So we're going to look for two numbers that, when we add them together, we get negative 2, and when we multiply together, we get negative 8. So those are going to be negative 4 and positive 2. So here's where the negative 4 goes here, and the positive 2 goes here. That's going to be all of the factors. Here for the difference of squares. So here we're going to look for what quantity we can square to get each of these things. So something is squared and then minus something else squared. To get x squared, of course, we can square just x. And then to get 16, we will square 4. Now the formula for the difference of squares is to take each of these quantities and take the sum of them, so the x and the 4, and then also take the difference of them, so the x and the 4 again. X plus 4 and x minus 4. That one is done. Adding and subtracting fractions. So we have different denominators. We have 12 and 20. We want to look for the least common multiple of 12 and 20. If you remember your 12 times tables, it goes 12, 24, 36, 48, 60, right? Your 20 times table is going to be 20, 40, 60. So both can get to 60 by multiplication. In order to get our 12th to 60, we'll multiply by 5. And whatever we do to the bottom, we must also do to the top of the fraction. To get our 20th to 60, we will multiply by 3. And whatever we do to the bottom, we must also do to the top. So our new fractions are going to be 5 times 5, 25 over 12 times 5, 60. Plus, and then 1 times 3, that's 3, over 20 times 3, 60. Now that we have two fractions with the same denominator, we can add them up. So we'll bring the denominator across, and then add across the top. 25 plus 3 will be 28. Now let's check for any common factors between 28 and 60. Both are divisible by 4. So 28 is 4 times 7, and 60 is 4 times 15. So we can reduce our fraction to 7 over 15. Equation with variables on both sides. So first, to go with our order of operations, we have to get rid of these parentheses. So let's distribute this negative 2 to both of these terms. Negative 2 times 1 will be negative 2. Negative 2 times minus 7n is going to be plus, because remember, negative times negative will be plus, and then 2 times 7n, 14n. I have not done anything to the left side yet, so I will bring it down unchanged. Now I want to combine all of the units, so I'm going to move this 2 to the other side. So these will cancel. We have 36 over here, as we have 34 plus 2. And we have 5n plus 36 equals, what's left? 14n. I want to now move these 5n to the other side by subtracting 5n. So these will cancel out. And then I must also subtract 5n from this side. We now have 36 equals 9n. Simply divide by 9 on both sides to get n equals 4. Okay, so multiplying rational expressions. We learned how to add and subtract on 10.1, but now we're going to multiply. So here are the steps. Completely factor all numerators and denominators, and reduce all common factors, and then rewrite the answer in factored form. So unlike the adding and subtracting fractions, we don't need a common denominator to multiply and divide. We do not need to. So in this example here, this has a denominator of x squared minus 25, and this has a denominator of 5x plus 10. So we can multiply just fine, even though they're different. This was factored into x plus 5 and x minus 5, and then a 5 was factored out of this to give 5 times x plus 2. At this point, multiplication is simply just going to combine our fractions top and bottom. So each factor is multiplied. So 4 times x plus 2 times x minus 5 is going to be the top. The bottom is x plus 5 times x minus 5 times 5 times x plus 2. Now we want to cancel anything we see that is on both the top and the bottom. So the x plus 2 is here and there. We can cross them out. X minus 5 is here and there. They will be crossed out. And now 4 is not on the bottom, so we'll leave it. The 5 is not on the top, so we'll leave it. And x plus 5 is not on the top, so we leave it. This is going to be our answer in its lowest terms. So, let's begin with this example. X squared minus 3x minus 18 over x minus 6 times x minus 5 times 2x. So let's factor this. We're going to look for two numbers that multiply to be negative 18 and then add to be negative 3. So 18 will be 6 times 3, and which one will be negative, the 6 or the 3? Well, if we want them to add to negative 3, it's going to be the 6. So to factor that, we'll have x minus 6 times x minus 3. I've not changed my denominator, didn't need to factor that because it already was. And then if you have a multiplying by a constant, this is over 1, right? So we don't have to write the 1 down there, and the 2x goes on the top. Now let's look for common factors. I see x minus 6 in both places, cross it out, and nothing else in common. So to finish, we have 2x, and we have x minus 3, and we have x minus 5. Wait, I made an error. I said the right thing, and then I wrote the wrong thing. So when I factor this top, then the numbers were minus 6 and plus 3. This should be x plus 3, and so should this. Sorry about the confusion. For this example, okay, this is already lowest terms. This is also lowest terms. Now x squared minus 25, we can factor. Let's look at our difference of squares. Looks a bit similar. In this case, it was 16, right? 16 is 4 squared. Over here, we have 25. 25 is what number squared? 5 squared. So let's bring this across again. If you have something that isn't a fraction, that's like having a fraction that's over 1. And then we just combine top and bottom. So on the top, we're going to have this and this. We're going to have x minus 5 and x plus 2. And the bottom, we're going to have 1, which we don't have to write. And then we're going to factor this. So we're going to have x for the first quantity and 5 for the second quantity. And remember, difference of squares becomes the sum and the difference of those two quantities. Look for common factors. We have x minus 5 and x minus 5. cross those out, and now we have these two, which I see only in the top and bottom respectively. So that's going to be the answer. In this case, where if there's only one factor on the top and bottom, you don't have to write the parentheses. That's okay if you don't. It's the same thing. Alright, more factors. So the only thing that I see to factor here is going to be this x squared minus 16, which should be rather familiar. Right here, we found two factors to be x plus 4 and x minus 4. So I'm going to handy dandy write those down. With those two, we have x as well, and at the bottom we have x plus 4, we have x minus 4, and we have 3. Now I see two factors that we can cancel. X plus 4 is here and here, and then x minus 4 is here and here. Cross them out, and the result is just x over 3. For this last example on this page, I see we're going to have to factor that. This is two copies of x plus 2, and then two of these, and that. I'm going to start by getting rid of this, because it's here and here. 3x minus 1 there, 3x minus 1 there. Now let's factor this. Look for two numbers that when we add together give us 3, when we multiply together give us 2. That's going to be 1 and 2. So 1 times 2 is 2, and 1 plus 2 is 3. So, works out. So our two factors are going to be x plus 1 and x plus 2. On the bottom we have x plus 2 squared right here, and then we have 3x plus 1. So I don't see x plus 1 anywhere down here. I see 3x plus 1. But again, that's not, we can't cancel this and leave behind the 3. Those are not factors of each other, because we couldn't, there's nothing we could multiply x plus 1 by to get 3x plus 1. If you multiplied it by 3, you would get 3x plus 3, which is not the same thing. I see x plus 2 here and here. Now this is squared. Take a moment to point out that x plus 2 squared, that's like saying it's x plus 2 times itself, right? There's two copies of it. So we can cross 1 out here, and we can cross out one of the copies. So we had 2, we took 1 off, now we have 1. Now our exponent to the power 1 is implicit on all of our terms. We don't have to write that way. So we're left behind with 1 x plus 2. Now I don't see anything else in common, so we're left with x plus 1 on the top, and then 1 copy of x plus 2 on the bottom, and 3x plus 1. Right. Now dividing rational expressions. If you know how to multiply, congratulations, you also know how to divide. Dividing by a fraction is multiplication, but we flip the second fraction on its head. So this division problem, this whole thing is unchanged here. The division becomes multiplication, and we just flip this on its head. At this point it's multiplication, and we can continue as before. So when we divide by something that's not a fraction, again, if it's not a fraction, really it's a fraction with 1 on the bottom. So this is like saying x squared minus 36, x minus 2 here, and then the division problem, dividing by x minus 6 over 1, becomes a multiplication problem, times 1 over x minus 6. Let's factor this, difference of squares. Our two quantities are going to be x and 6. So we're going to have x plus 6 and x minus 6. The 1 I don't need to write, because multiplying by 1 is does not do anything. And we have x minus 2 and x minus 6 from here and here. See x minus 6 in both places, and then I don't see those in both places. So that's what we're left with, x plus 6, x minus 2. Okay, we're going to need to factor this one. Everything else is factored for us. Let's start with this. Adds to 10, multiplies to 16. So things that multiply to 16, we have 1 times 16, 2 times 8, and 4 times 4. I'm going to go with 2 times 8, because 2 plus 8 is 10. So that's now factored. I've brought the bottom along unchanged. Now dividing becomes multiplying, and then we flip it on its head. We take the bottom, put it on the top, and we take the top, we put it on the bottom. I see x plus 8 here, I see it there. I see x plus 2 here, and I see it there. We're left with just x minus 4 and x minus 5. That's on the top, and that's on the bottom. I see two things we need to factor on this one. We want multiplies to 9 and adds to 3. There aren't a whole lot of things that multiply to 9. We're going to have 1 and 9, which would make 10 in the middle. And we have 3 and 3, which will make 6 in the middle. So that's the one we want. And then this one, multiplies to negative 6, adds to negative 1. That is on the front here. Or was it? Oh, that was a different one, sorry. But multiplies to negative 6, adds to negative 1. So again, 2 and 3 will make 6, but if they were both positive, we would get 5. We want negative 1, so it's going to be negative 3. Let's write this out as factors. Nothing to do at the top. We're going to have x minus 3 and x plus 2. And then the division becomes multiplication. The bottom goes on the top. X plus 3 is now on top. And then, as we said, this was going to be 3 and 3. Now let's cancel. X plus 2 here and there. X plus 3 here and here. Now every copy you have will only cancel one copy on the bottom, right? If we have 2 up here, we could cancel both, but we have 2 down here and 1 up here. So this 1 will cancel 1, but we'll be left with 1 x plus 3 still there. On the top, I just see 3. On the bottom, I see x minus 3, and I see x plus 3. Over here, we have x plus 3, x plus 2. Again, it's a fraction over 1, and then we're going to factor this. This is a difference of squares again. We're going to have x, and then this is going to be 2 squared. So let's factor into x plus 2 and x minus 2. X plus 3 is still here. The division becomes multiplication, and we flip it upside down. The bottom comes to the top. The top goes to the bottom. Cancel factors. X plus 2 is here and there. And I do not see anything else to cancel. So we have x minus 2, and we have 1. We do not need to write 1 times stuff, because multiplying by 1 just gives us the same thing. So we have x minus 2, and on the bottom we have x plus 3. Two more things to factor. Multiplies to 10, adds to 7. Not too many options for making 10. We can have 1 times 10, that would give us 11. We can have 2 times 5, and that would give us 7. So it looks like that's what we want. And here we want to multiply to negative 5, and we want to add to 4. So to get negative 5, 5 is prime, so it's going to be 5 and 1. Which one's going to be negative? Well, the sum should be positive. So the 5 will be positive, and the 1 will be negative. Let's bring this across. Bring it down. We have x minus 1 on the top, and then this in a factored form. So we said the two numbers were 5 and negative 1. We can cross these out immediately. multiply problem. Bottom comes to the top, and the top goes to the bottom. We said the two numbers were 5 and 2. And we can cross these out as well. And I guess, looks like there's nothing on the top. So we're not going to write 0 on the top. This is where the 1 is going to come in, right? Because this is saying x plus 2, right? We could say it's also x plus 2 times 1, because that's x plus 2. So the 1 is still here. And on the bottom we have 2 copies of x plus 5. So we can write them both out like this. We could also write it as 1 over x plus 5 to the power of how many copies do we have? 1, 2. So we could also write it as 1 over x plus 5 squared. And for the final example on these notes, we're going to need to factor this and this. So we want adds to 5, multiplies to 4. The numbers are going to be 4 and 1. Now this one, difference of squares, you could also see it as multiplies to negative 1 and adds to 0. So that's going to be 1 and negative 1. Let's write those down. So the 4 and the 1 on the top. On the bottom we have 1 and negative 1. And then our division becomes multiplication, and we flip the fraction. To the bottom, x minus 5, and the top, x plus 4. Let's cancel some factors. See x plus 1 here and here, and I see x plus 4 here and there. I don't see anything else to cancel. We're left with x minus 5 over x minus 1.